Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, our guest is the author of The Digital Coaching Revolution: How to Support Employee Development and Coaching Tech. Please welcome Dr. Anna Tavis. Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here, Mark.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here, and I really enjoyed your book. And I thought that our audience would really get a lot out of it, especially for what we're going through now with AI. But before we go into your book, why don't you tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you got to where you're at right now?
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. I think what's really important to me is that I started out as an academic, got my PhD, started teaching, got tenure, and then I realized that that wasn't really enough. I could not see myself just teaching for the rest of my life. So I left academia, I left a safe tenure job, and I went to work for a technology company at that time and moved from the US, from New York to London, worked for Motorola first, and then in Helsinki for Nokia, a European technology company. And that opened my eyes on, kind of the frontiers of technology innovation. It was fascinating to see, also in the context of not only working in Europe as opposed to, coming from the US, working in Europe, but also working for non-US companies to see how technology, the development of technology, et cetera, is indeed impacted by the culture you're in. Because between Motorola and Nokia at that time, there was a very different kind of philosophical and strategic approach to how technologies evolved. And then I decided to return to the US and worked on Wall Street for a good chunk of years, but then returned to academia, having completed kind of the full cycle, going through technology companies, financial services companies, living through the ups and downs of actually a very dynamic and very turbulent business environment, right in the middle of the financial crisis. Returning to academia now, what I do, my research, my teaching is very much informed by my experience working for companies and also working globally.
What made you write this book?
The Digital Coaching Revolution. So here's what I started doing in academia. I really wanted to connect the challenges and opportunities in the pace of change in the workplace with the teaching professional education. And I developed two kind of parallel programs. One was in people analytics and technology, since I'm the department chair of human capital management programs. So people analytics and technology program, where we educated data scientists who worked specifically with the people data. And then parallel to that, we established another Master's of Science degree in executive coaching, organizational consulting. That was on the kind of the human side of the equation. So you have technology track, you have coaching track. And as I started, looking at the market, especially at the time of COVID, I saw these two different tracks coming together, because we needed more and more technology to deliver coaching, which is very high touch, personalized, et cetera. And companies started to spring up literally right before the pandemic that provided platforms for connecting coaches with the people who needed coaching, but it all happened through technology. And so what I started doing is bringing those two trends together and convening on NYU campus here in New York, a conference, a summit, which was called Coaching and Technology, starting out with inviting companies that were exploring this emerging market for technology-supported, technology-enabled coaching. And now we are in the fourth year, and as all of us know, what started as a platform is now ending up being AI, now integrating agents and all kinds of other tools that are, kind of stepping in and replacing a lot of what used to be exclusively human endeavor or human profession. And what I'm seeing as a feedback into the educational system that I run is that now we are integrating technology more and more into how we teach, what we teach, providing our students with AI coaches as they go through. It's not just the instructor, but also all of our students get an AI coach, so that they could be supported through their education. And so the two programs that started like with parallel tracks, are now totally intertwined. And that's what prompted me to write the book and kind of capture the moment, even though I knew from the very beginning, the minute the ink dried up on that book, it was going to be outdated in a sense. But that's why I wanted to kind of integrate a little bit of the deeper kind of philosophical and higher level understanding of what's happening as a trend, and then capture the key moments that mattered in the evolution of that particular trend.
Explain what you mean by that all your students get digital coaches.
Yeah, so this is where, I'm working with through our conference, we bring on campus emerging and more established companies that specialize in coaching. And so we partner with a few of those companies, and as students join and sign up for our classes, and they become students of NYU, they all get an invitation to sign up and have their own personalized coach. And it's not just that they are customizing their chat GPTs or Gemini or whatever LLM they're using for their classwork. They actually, and there is a difference between those and specialized coaching tools. Most of them, the tool we're using is exclusively AI. It's not that we are connecting our students with a live coach who is sitting on the other side of the Zoom. They actually get an AI that learns about them. It gets trained on who they are, what their needs are, and these AI coaches support our students through their educational journey.
And you're saying they're using like DeepSeek and ChatGPT?
No, they're using, in our case, we use a company called Valence. So it's not kind of an open source where you're going out there. It is within the environment of NYU. We have contracts there because there are privacy concerns and all kinds of restrictions as to how those data are being used outside of the learning environment. So the students have those tools with the insurances and contracts that guarantee that their data are not being used for training, external training, or any type of behind the firewall of the institution use of those data.
Are you the only, I haven't heard, at least here in Asia, I haven't heard of any school providing a digital coach. Is NYU or is this now common in the US?
No, it's not. I consider myself a pioneer in that space. I think there are various applications where I think what you see more common is that people, again, customize their chat GPT or DeepSeek or whatever they're using to their own needs and kind of create their own. But there are specific, coding requirements, especially around kind of emotional AI and, AI that is better trained and better tuned on the relationship fine tuning, not just task execution. And we are really an innovator in that space. That's what I pride myself on. I have this conference that comes in, and I am the pilot a lot of times and the training ground, working with these companies, and at the same time as we're doing research as to what does it mean for education, what does it mean for all of our students having access to a digital coach that supports them on their own personal individual learning journey.
Wow. So, okay. So what's that going to mean for individual live coaches? Um, Does that mean that those coaches disappear because AI just gets smarter and smarter and smarter, and they can draw from more information? They can even draw from more stories and other people's experiences as if they were their own. So what's going to happen with in that area?
So just like everything else, I see this more as an augmentation, not replacement of life coaches. But we have to be honest with ourselves around the availability of live coaches to the masses of students that we're seeing. Some of the very interesting applications of these particular tools are being used in high school, for example, in a high school environment where the ratio of a student, college counselor per a student is very, very high, especially in, underserved communities. You could have 500 students per one college counselor. What are the limitations of relying exclusively on human coaches? That means that it's not equitably distributed. It's the live coaches are not available 24/7. So it's access and scale that you can get. And on top of that, since you, Mark, are broadcasting to a very global community, the beauty of these tools is that they speak 120 languages of the world. If I am studying in English in Hanoi University, but my preference is to be coached in Vietnamese, this AI coach could easily transition into Vietnamese, and it's a voice-driven coach. They remember what you do, and I'm actually uh, about to launch a similar pilot in Japan. I personally don't speak Japanese, and we are trying it out right now. And the feedback we're getting is very, very positive around how how accurate the translations are. I mean, they're not translations. The bot is fluent in in those languages. So that's the advantage. You could scale. You can access 24/7. If I am like most students doing their work, really late at night, how many human coaches are you going to be accessing at midnight? Probably not that many. However, your AI coach is always available to you. But where the human coach comes in is it's like an assistant to the human coach, because obviously it's addressing certain level of questions. But once you have those needs addressed, those questions answered, you're working on a regular basis with this coach, you go show up once in 2 weeks to see your live coach, your human coach, and your conversation is taken to a very, very different level, because you don't need the basics. You don't need the plans. You really can dig into the deeper issues that only human to human can resolve. And that is obviously putting a lot of expectation and pressure on human coaches, because let's just be honest with ourselves. How many of our human coaches live up to the highest standard of expectation? Very,
Unfortunately, very few.
very few. So what we're telling the coaching community is not only do you need to learn how to use these technologies to power your own coaching practice, but you also have to be a master coach. You better learn how to be a master coach, because if you are not, you are replaced.
No question about it. What were the ethical issues you struggled with when putting these programs together that you've developed at NYU?
I mean, obviously, there are a lot of questions around, you know, how these tools are used. First of all, in the learning environment we're in, we didn't have coaches. The only coaches our students had access to were through the career center. They had to make an appointment, and they were very, very specific to job applications, et cetera, interviews, et cetera. There's only very specific use case. So it's not like we were replacing an army of live coaches who were helping our students. No, our students were on their own. If they had access to the faculty member, they were lucky. But even the faculty members, you know, they don't, their primary job is to do something else, not coach. And there's a whole different conversation around how the role of faculty changes if we have these tools that become basically teaching assistants. And so it's a privacy and data security, right? And this is where, you know, we have to go pick the right provider of those AI coaches. But we go with Valence, a company that is leading in AI coaching space. And
And
we
how
go
do you spell that?
Valence, just like you hear it, VAL, Valence. I'll write it in the chat. It's an
Wonderful.
incredible company. It's actually Canadian. Um, and it's an AI coach driven, you know, a company exclusively. They're working on as much on EQ of their tools as on the AI, the intelligence part. But anyway, you know, you go through the contractual arrangement just like you would use any technology that you bring into your organization, whether it's HRS or any other tools, Concur or SAP, whatever technology you bring in, you that collects data from your employees, from your students, etc. Same thing, you go through the privacy conversations, and it's very important to vet your vendor, whoever you're partnering with on this, and they have to be a very close partner in helping you design, provide feedback, et cetera, et cetera. But the data, the most important thing is that the data are not leaving the firewall of your organization.
So we haven't got quite the chance to jump in the book. So let's start with chapter one. Could you elaborate on how specific ways in which the integration of technology such as dashboards and trackers have changed the practice of coaching in the digital era?
You know, I mean, that's exactly where the dashboards, et cetera, that's already behind us, right? By the time the book was published, et cetera, you know, data visualization. So I will comment on a more general, use of data. I think it's a really important. All of us are aware of employee surveys. You know, organizations want to hear about engagement, commitment of employees, you know, comes from satisfaction. And what do we do to get the data? We send out a once a year or once in 2 years employee survey, and we ask employees to answer those questions, right? So there's lots of noise in between that contact with the employee and the data that organization receives. You know, if I'm asked questions, I'm not sure, again, the same question of privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So the data that are received from asking people direct questions and people reporting on those are pretty much, you know, not particularly precise. And that's what we've been going with, the data dashboards, et cetera. So what's happening with coaching right now? Organizations that are beginning to deploy these coaching tools, it's not that the data, private data, are revealed to the management. It's not identifiable, et cetera, et cetera. But you can get feedback on the trends, on the key conversations that the employees are having with their AI coaches are pretty much on a regular basis, so that you could look at this is what trending today, or on a monthly basis, depending on how often you want to receive the feedback data. You understand what areas are of greater concern, where there are the pockets of manager relational conflicts, et cetera, that are being discussed. So what you're getting as far as the uses of data, I personally think that once these tools are going to be further integrated into organizations, we're going to see employee surveys, engagement surveys going away, because we're going to have a much more precise, just-in-time collection of data that are going to be more accurate, more representative of what the sentiment of employees is. And we are going to have that access pretty much on an ongoing basis.
How's that going to work out in terms of confidentiality? I mean, like, will the coach be more like a psychologist, and that it has confidentiality where nobody will know what's interchanged? Or will companies like your bosses have access to everything that you've communicated to the AI bot, and they'll be able to use it in whatever way they want to, because it's owned by the company, you work for the company? Where's the line go where whatever you've said that you're thinking is just in the privacy of your conversation with your AI coach, and now it's shared to other people, and maybe they even use it against you because of something that you've talked about that you really didn't want other people, but wanted to sound it out with the AI bot?
That's actually not how it works. Again, the design is such that the conversations you are having with the bot are private to you and that particular bot. As I said, all that is being reported, and the data sits with a third party. It doesn't sit within the organization.
But the
It's
organization doesn't have rights since they're paying for this.
what
Uh,
they're getting. No, just as similar to employee surveys. I mean, it's the same set of requirements. When you run surveys with a vendor, the data again sits with a third party, and all that organization is getting back is the general trends. It's not identifiable to a specific employee, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the kinds of data that you could look at. It's not like you're going to be, what did John say to, Jane, and I'm going to be able to unwind that particular conversation. And in fact, what we're seeing and there are a lot of really psychological research that's coming up, shows that employees or people are more trusting in their conversation of the bots, the AI, than human managers.
I'm not
Because,
surprised. They're
yeah,
not feeling judged.
exactly, they're not feeling judged. There's no power distance, there's no status concerns, and there's no concern around how exactly what you, Mark, said, how the data is going to be taken against me. If I go to my manager and I reveal to my manager that I don't really have that skill. I don't know how to do this task or whatever. Or even from the point of view of conflicts, or I have a conflict with my peer and I know that my boss is not tolerant of any kind of conflicts, and so I'm covering it up. So, the conversations with AIs are a lot more frank and candid. And that way, this is where I'm saying, from the point of view of sentiment analysis and looking at general trends, you can get a more precise view of what actually is happening, what's in the minds of your employees than what you're getting out of the surveys.
We have a question from the audience. How can digital coaching platforms be designed to effectively support the fast-paced decision-making and emotional resilience required of early-stage entrepreneurs?
I mean, absolutely. I think, first of all, the very simple answer to that is it is a 24/7 service, anytime, always available, at scale, etc. Let me give you an example. I'm not maybe in the space of entrepreneurs, but how, for example, an organization like Delta Airlines, one of the largest airlines in the United States, and I suspect in the world as well, there was a big computer outage last year when a lot of like Delta, I mean, the entire computer system was knocked out. And at that time, Delta was already experimenting with these bots. And what they thought they were going to do is use those bots that became available to all of their employees kind of on the in all of the different hubs and around the world, that they put that information through, kind of trained the bot centrally on how to respond to some of those critical issues. So rather than sending an email to all the employees about what to do, you could have a back and forth support system at all of these different global hubs in helping you deal, at least with the basic level of information that the company is making available to you globally in your language, right? So that is very convenient and scalable. And so from the point of view of the fast pace, I think like risk management, disaster support, etc., of people who are distributed around the world and don't necessarily have access. You think so many situations like that, you could have a support system that's available to you. And Delta now is using these bots across their entire organization. As far as startups, you can train your startup on the best practice, on your bot on the best practices of startup management. Like, let's follow Reid Hoffman, who is, the Startup of You, Masters of Scale. Some of you may know his work. I mean, like, incredible. And he actually created a bot of himself that, if you're a startup founder and you want advice from Reid Hoffman, guess what? You're not probably going to be able to reach him. He's too busy. He's a human. There's only a limited time that he makes available, but you have access to his bot, to the avatar that is trained on all of the body of knowledge that he put into that bot. And that could be available to any entrepreneur around the world. And I think that is amazing. You can get your answers without, having to just listen to his podcasts or whatever. So that's available. So I think there are multiple uses, and we're in such early stages for these types of technologies that we're just growing the portfolio of different use cases again, of how these tools could be applied, these coaching tools could be applied. And if any one of you on the call have ideas of how they could be used, let me know. I have so many different companies that are coming to my conference that are experimenting in different domains, and they would love to partner with people who want to try and experiment and continue to develop that type of approach.
When is your conference?
My conference is 7 and 8 of July, and I will send a link. We don't have an online version of it, but there will be lots of publications associated with that, as well as the names of companies that are present. So I'll send a link through the chat.
Wonderful. In chapter two, given the growing prevalence of digital coaching platforms and AI-driven coaching tools modeled on goal-setting theories such as GROW, how do you foresee the coach's role evolving in terms of interpersonal processes and communications, areas traditionally considered less amenable to standardization and automation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And in fact, I just dropped off a product update from Valence, and that's exactly the area that they're focused on, because as far as kind of the transactional efficiency, productivity type of tasks that AI is trained on, that's going to be outsourced to agents, right? The agents are going to take care of that. And where I'm seeing the whole kind of coaching industry is moving toward is specifically on the emotional side, relational side of these types of technologies. In fact, we believe that right now we're experiencing a huge deficit of a relational knowledge. And, I don't know about Asia. I'll be very interested to hear around the world, but in the US, this Generation Z that's coming up, having grown in a pandemic, isolated, mostly on the tools, et cetera, they're the social skills, the ability to connect, the ability to deal even with difficult people is gone, because the entire technologies have been focused on creating the seamless, effortless, and always kind of aligned to you and customized to you environments, and we don't develop the right kinds of social skills to be operating in a complex human society that has huge implications for all sorts of things. And so now these particular coaches are being trained on developing the emotional skills, emotional intelligence, helping humans, interestingly enough, helping humans regain those capabilities that we've lost through the experience of COVID.
Yeah, and Asia, there's a real focus on soft skills and getting kids to develop those. Corporations are demanding that here, and um, this go back to work, which is now being more forced in the United States. That was reinforced as soon as COVID ended here. There was no working from home type of scenario, except for college professors who are doing research. Then the schools let them do the research from home. So they are not inundated with students and everybody coming to them. And the people who are digital nomads, well, they're home also. But all the other workers, you got to do the work at the office. Um, with the lack of formal governmental regulation in the coaching profession, to what extent do you believe the development and enforcement of coexistent ethical standards by major associations, such as ICF and EMCC, I don't know those organizations, can address concerns regarding coach competency, client outcomes, and public trust, especially as the field expands rapidly and attracts practitioners from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah. So ICF, International Coaching Federation, and the European Management Association that have very strict ethical guidelines. And what we are seeing more and more, in fact, they're celebrating their, I think, 25th, 30th anniversary. The accreditation through ICF, at least in the US, ICF, and in Europe, it's EMCC. Um, uh, but ICF is global. In fact, Singapore, for example, has a huge chapter, ICF chapter there. They're a global association. Those standards are now, at least in the US, are required. It's very rare, only probably a few left over from the previous times where you have coaches who are not accredited through ICF. Now, companies, when they hire coaches, require ICF certification. We, as a school, We have both a certification and a master's degree, and we as a school have accreditation through ICF. So we're able to not only educate and provide MRU degree, but we also provide our graduates with ICF certification because we ourselves are accredited through them. So those days when there was kind of free for all, anyone could just put a shingle there and say, I'm a coach. They're beginning to dissipate. In fact, our program, which was the first academic program in specifically coaching, is now 6 years old. And the Europeans have established their own academic credentials. So we're seeing more and more recognition of coaching as a legitimate professional skill set that stands next to therapy, next to other types of skills. And we are actually adding to our educational programs also a certification through National Board of Health and Wellbeing Coaching, which is a specialty of coaching that is focused on wellness, mental health, other types of issues that people experience, and for that, you also need certification. So coaching is maturing as a profession, and I envision in the future that it's going to be a go-to tool. Again, precisely because these technologies, agents are going to take care of all of the transactions, and humans will have to focus on very, very human skills, which coaching is designed to support and develop.
Question from the audience. In your view, how can digital coaching be designed to help individuals build discipline as a foundation for sustained high performance, especially considering that while motivation is powerful, it's not always present and discipline itself can waver?
Yeah, and that's exactly how these tools are very effective because they don't leave you there. You set them up. Obviously, at the end of the day, the individual has to do it themselves. However, the level of support, a lot of times that kind of flagging or lagging commitment, engagement, et cetera, has to do with, lack of supervision, support, mentorship, etc. So that's what these tools are designed to replace and it's come in for. So you automatically, like, my meeting with a coach is scheduled and it comes up on my calendar. I don't have to schedule it. Comes up on my calendar. All I have to do is, and it's a voice driven, you go to the website and converse with my coach regularly. It's all scheduled, and it's a huge motivator because you are being supported. Again, I think motivation and other types of social skills are social. You do much better. Like, for example, let's say you need to train for a marathon. Yeah, you can do it on your own. You can keep running. But if you are in a social group, chances are you're going to be trained better. You're going to have a social support network. We've also learned like, if you're modifying your diet, join a walking club, join a weight loss community. And now it's really important because I'm now really looking at how coaching is being integrated into health and well-being space. It's a lot of it has to do with lifestyle. Good health is associated with lifestyle modifications. And that's where, again, this kind of continuous support, reminders, recommendations, understanding, it's always there, it's always for you, it's trained on you, and it's very supportive. So that's how it works.
In chapter 3, given the shift towards more integrated and programmatic approaches in digital coaching, how can companies best measure the ROI of these coaching initiatives, particularly in relation to broader organizational learning and development goals?
Yeah, what's really interesting around ROI is how these coaching tools are beginning to be deployed, not just for the personal purposes, but also, for example, and I'll give you an example of performance management. Setting goals. It's not HR chasing you down to set your goals and telling you what to do. You actually can have a very personalized goal setting conversation. So, and all the way, it takes you all the way to your conversations with your manager, where you're coming in better prepared with the data. You get coached, or you get advice, you get feedback on a regular basis, and that is supported with the data, supported with recommendations of how you can improve, et cetera, et cetera. All of it could be measured. And obviously that leads to better alignment around organizational goals. It provides, again, feedback on performance so that you could correct whatever you are not doing right. That's available to you, rather than waiting in a traditional system. You wait until the end of the year to find out that you did something wrong without really much of the help and support from your manager. So it really enables a much more inclusive, much more involved management of performance pretty much on a daily basis, and that definitely leads to better results. And you can measure it in a very tangible ways. If you're a salesperson, you have a sales coach who can help you, deal with day-to-day every client situation. In fact, this is already being used. If you are a customer service person, you have an assistant that helps you, better deal with, angry customer. And because you get really upset about how your conversation went, you have a little coaching session that helps you get through it. So the opportunities are so diverse and so tangible for organizations to be deploying these types of tools to enable each and every employee improve their performance.
In chapter 4, how do you foresee the balance evolving between maintaining the human element of coaching and leveraging increasingly advanced technologies such as AI-driven matching and analytics as digital coaching continues its optimization phase within organizations?
So, I mean, I already mentioned the data and the data accuracy. Communicating the data back to the organization is an important aspect of it. It's data visualization, other types of reporting systems. All of that is helping both organizations and individuals course correct when needed, and provides a lot of really helpful support. But the beauty of it is, and I think that's a qualitative difference from where we were before. I feel that it used to be data for data's sake. Your consultants are going to generate all the dashboards, et cetera, et cetera. Now that data could be read back to you in a very accessible way, without it could be visualized the right way. It could be, you could plan scenarios around data that's available. That's what's so fascinating about the availability of this kind of more intuitive data to the organizational management, that you kind of go so many different levels down to what actually is driving performance, et cetera, in an organization. And it all is data, even though we're talking about, personal, individual, in aggregate connection to, organizational goals, et cetera.
In chapter 5, as coaching providers increasingly adopt advanced analytics, AI, and biometric tools, how can an organization balance the drive for measurable outcomes with the need to preserve privacy, trust, and the fundamentally aspects of human coaching relationships?
Yeah, I think I've already answered that question, Mark, when I talked about how the data privacy is being handled by,
Yeah, in the beginning. Yeah.
yeah, by our organ. We kind of, anticipated some of these questions.
In chapter 6, as coaching providers increasingly adopt advanced analytics, AI, and biometric tools, how can, given the historical challenges in quantifying the ROI and KPI impact of coaching, what guidance would you offer to coaching leaders and L&D professionals seeking to build a persuasive business case for coaching investments, especially when traditional metrics may not fully capture its long-term value? I kind of believe that's going to be a big issue when you're going to the CFO and asking for capital to do this.
Yeah, no, I think it all comes down, and kind of all of these questions are interconnected. It all comes down to the increased productivity, increased efficiency, and most importantly, engagement, etc. And most important, I think what we're looking at right now is the overall well-being of employees, because the data that are beginning, to surface and become available um, organizations, again, in the aggregate level, has to do not only with commitment to specific goal completion, performance, et cetera, but the overall well-being, because there's no way we don't bring our whole selves to work. And if something is top of mind for me and I'm concerned and I have a family situation that needs to be managed, you kind of need to be supported on that. And in previous iterations of our organizations, that wasn't available to employees. You kind of leave your family, leave your life, leave who you are at the door, and you just execute on tasks. Now the tasks, when we actually engage all the agents that are beginning to get available to us, and even the basic AIs, there's a lot more support that needs to be placed in for that whole side of you, and organizations will have the capacity to address that. And as far as the ROI is concerned, healthier, well-balanced employees are not only better workers, they're better connected, they're creating better social outcomes, they're better innovators. There's so many downstream impacts for companies to invest in supporting each and every employee in their workplace.
Do you use it yourself? I mean, even though you're super knowledgeable, very experienced, all of those things. Because when I think of these coaches, I think more or less for, college age students, even high school students. But for someone who is experienced like yourself, how do you use this coaching?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Mark. I use them more on an as needed basis. I did try to do kind of a regular sessions, etc., but with my busy life, etc. But for example, I know that I'm going into a difficult conversation and I have a coach available to me, and I practice. I practice. I know I will have an interview with the media about some, situation that is very conflict, driven or conflict prone. I usually get approached about layoffs or the uses of by the media, major media outlets. I can practice. I want to make sure that what I communicate is, accurate. At the same time, I don't really come across with some very strong opinions that might, turn off half of the population out there. So it's like as needed. And most importantly, again, for relationships, these types of, putting like the political social polish on how I show up. Now almost never do I send an email, especially in conflict, in the context of some conflict that's happening at work. Do I just send an email? I always go back and forth with my coach, like, how do I present what I want to say in a constructive way? And as a faculty member, I use it all the time to think about how I evaluate students' work. What kind of feedback are there? Obviously, I have a point of view, but I don't want to be subjective. I'm like, what are the areas of, in this particular paper or in this particular presentation that I overlooked? Help me find opportunities to provide even more constructive feedback to my students.
What are the business opportunities that you see? Because as I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking that there's all kinds of different opportunities to leverage one's expertise to create coaches and then be able to charge people for this particular knowledge. So, what do you see as the entrepreneurial opportunities here?
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like, maybe outside of Singapore, Asia is very, very, is a lot of opportunity there. Here in the US, we have a lot of companies that are breaking in, but I think the market is still not locked in. There's not like a Google, and even though I mentioned like Valence, there's a Better Up and a few other leading companies, but the market is very, very rich. I will have over 25 companies coming, a lot of them startups coming to my conference to show what they're doing. And there are different aspects of coaching that they cover. And I think because of the need to create more context, cultural context, and other types of contexts, I am seeing opportunities around the world where, for example, if you are in Vietnam, some US designed coaches will need to be fine-tuned, et cetera, to be valid in the Vietnamese context. But I think in all of those markets, there's an opportunity to create something more native and contextually relevant to those environments for as long as you kind of understand, what you want to accomplish. And I can see a whole number of these coaches available for all aspects of what we do, financial planning and teaching and, looking for a job and even being an entrepreneur and being a doctor, being a policeman. We're going to see these coaches populating, working with us and supporting us. And this is where I see, and I want to finish on that because, it's been a long conversation, that we always think of AI as humans against AI, like kind of a competition going on. And I don't think that that's the case. It's humans with AI. We are being not just augmented, we're being supported. We can use those tools to be even more impactful, even more human, and even more effective in all of our areas of work because we have access to these powerful technologies. But we need
How
to,
much are,
you know,
I'm sorry.
yeah, go
How
ahead.
much are these coaches costing? Like what are people expecting to pay for these 24-hour, 365-day a year coaches?
I am not, Mark, familiar with, the economics of this. I think these are individual negotiations with companies, et cetera. And I
I'm just wondering the ballpark of what
yeah,
you've heard.
I don't know.
Mm,
In different markets, it could be different costs. I personally, I don't pay anything for them because I work with these companies and they use us because we're
of
like
course.
one of the first universities that, is using these certain tools, and they want our feedback. And as you know, the other incentive being at the university for these companies to come in is because they want our students to be trained on those tools, and they give them for free. OpenAI does that, Google does that, etc. Like outside of coaching, Google just gave us Gemini for free, the entire university, because they want younger people, professionals growing up with those tools so that they can continue to use them as they move on. So they're kind of competing with each other, what markets they're going to lock for themselves going forward as they continue to develop these technologies. So that's why I don't really know what corporates are paying for it. But you could certainly reach out to like Valence and just inquire what that might cost.
So here's my last question for you. Given the rapid growth of the coaching profession and the unregulated nature of the industry, what specific measures beyond credentialing can organizations implement to ensure they're selecting coaches with the appropriate skills and ethical standards for specific needs?
Yeah, so that's human coaches, right? Not
Yeah,
AI.
yeah.
It's usually experience and again, these certifications that are, required right now. There are different levels of credential. You can be basic level ACC, PCC, and MCC. You kind of grow, and you have to take exams, and they're very serious exams. And there are coaching hours. So these are the credentials, not only take an exam and pass the body of knowledge that coaching models, et cetera, but also how many coaching hours, and those coaching hours have to be documented. And then you get references from your clients. You get, so this is how certification occurs. It's not just because somebody told you they're a coach and you immediately bring them in if it is a human coach. And as you know, with AIs coming in, you don't need kind of basic level coaches. You need coaches who have already developed a very strong professional brand. And that's what you're looking for: experience, mastery, client testimonials, hours, how long you're coaching. And now with the, what we use technology also to train coaches, there's a lot of data on how they coach, how much you speak, how much you listen, those basic markers of coach mastery. It's a really interesting phase in coach education, and we're going to be and credential, and we're also going to be talking about it at my summit. Everyone is invited. I hope if there are any people who listen to you that are based or just fly in, we have a lot of people coming from all over the world to attend.
If you send me a link, I'll make sure folks get that out. I mean, just don't put it in the chat, just send me an email
Yeah.
link and I'll take care of that. And the last thing, comment on all this is I can see where this is going to be immeasurably valuable for rural areas that you can't get this kind of expertise easily, like living in a major city like New York or Hanoi. And I can see where this will level the playing field for third world countries.
Totally.
That so it's going to be even a more competitive world in some senses, but you'll see maybe a lot less poverty over the next 5 to 10 years because of this.
I totally agree with you. I look at this, what I call democratization. We
Yeah.
talked about personalization, we talked about access, scale, languages, but the democratization is very important, where people would never have access to. I made an example of Reid Hoffman, right? And now anyone around the world can have access to this person. And then it's about your own initiative. It's your own, you have a lot more support than you used to have.
Well, I have to say this hour went too fast. And this was very much mind-opening to me because I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, all these different opportunities. It seems like an overwhelming amount of opportunities that are out there. But I can see even businesses where your parents can share all their knowledge. And even when mom and dad pass on to the next life, you still have mom and dad's knowledge and your grandparents' knowledge. It can be passed down.
And there are
So,
services, there are already services like that as well.
of course.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for
Thank
taking the
you.
time to speak with us. And the book is amazing. And what you talk about is so far reaching, futuristic that we can't believe it's here now. So
Yeah,
thank you for taking the time, and thank you all for joining us. And everybody have a good rest of your week. Take care.
thank you.